So here we're going to see the SphereShield governance for Webex Teams. We're in the SphereShield portal at the moment, and you can see we're in the governance section. The first thing we're going to want to do is enable Webex Governance. So let's click yes over here, and you can see that there are many different types of policies which are configurable. The first thing that you can choose is how to address governance violations. Do you want to block the action or do you want to monitor? Blocking the action would mean, for example, if somebody creates a space against the policy, then the space would be deleted, whereas monitor would just monitor the action and the action would be audited, but the space wouldn't actually be deleted. So that's the first thing you can do. Let's go to the next section. We've got space moderation, and we've got several policies here which deal with moderating spaces. So first of all, you can assign an Active Directory group as moderators, meaning that anytime you have a space that has a member from a certain Active Directory group, they will always be a moderator on that space. You then have the option to allow additional groups to moderate or not. So sometimes you may only want this first Active Directory group to moderate spaces if they're part of spaces, without giving the option to other groups to be able to moderate. Sometimes you may also want other groups to be able to moderate. The third thing that you can configure over here is the group that requires a global moderator. What's a global moderator? So this global moderator gives the organization a hand in every space. In the event that the moderator of the space leaves the organization or leaves the space, you don't want to be left with an unmanaged space, a space which is out of the control of the organization. So we add a global moderator, and it's simply a user that the organization's admins can use in order to then access that space and deal with the space after the moderator has left the organization. And you can input here the space moderator's email. Then we've got some policies with regards to Webex governance. So we've got groups who are allowed to create spaces, groups who are allowed to create teams, groups allowed to add users to spaces, and groups who are allowed to add users to Webex Teams. All these groups here are Active Directory groups, so you can really control who's allowed to create spaces, who's allowed to create teams and add users, etc. Again, to be able to give the organization a control over what's going on in the Webex environment. Finally, there is the option to enable the retention policy engine, which we'll see more shortly. Then there's space management, so the space notification block message. There is an option to block spaces. We'll see this in space management, what it means to block a space. But briefly, blocking a space is like archiving. The space is blocked, and all further communication is not possible. And the question is, what would the user experience be when a space is blocked? What would the message be in that space? So here you can input your own message. You can configure it here. We've configured this space was blocked due to company policy. No new content or new members are allowed. Please contact support for further help. Finally, in the governance policies, we have naming policies. This enables organizations to create policies to address the naming conventions of their spaces. You can add prefixes or suffixes to space names. A prefix or a suffix can be either a free text or an attribute. If it's an attribute, it can be either a department or a country. So here we've configured it to be a department. That means every space which is created by, let's say, the finance department will have a prefix. It will say finance and then the space name. Again, you can have it as a country, so maybe every space which was created by somebody from France will have France and then the space name. Similarly, you can do this for suffix. Again, you can do it based on text or attributes. So now let's have a look at space management. So in the space and direct room management section of the portal, the first thing that you can see is that we have a list here of all the spaces and direct rooms in the environment. Each space and direct room automatically comes with a certain amount of metadata. So you've got the title of the space or direct room, you've got the type, so whether it's a space or a direct room. Here you can see that they're all spaces. You've got the room scope, so whether there are external members in the space or whether it's just internal. You've got the tags which you can add to spaces. The tags are tags which you can add with SphereShield. These are good for being able to search spaces and also being able to set retention policies. Then there's the state, so whether the spaces are active or blocked, the last activity time, retention policy type, so we'll see that there are different ways of setting retention policies. You can use the policy engine, or you can manually set the retention policy. You can see the retention period and whether it's the units are in minutes or days. On the right hand side, you can open up each space and see some extra information about the space. So you can see who is it created by, whether it has a moderator, what the classification is. Classification here refers to Webex classification. As you know, in Webex you're able to classify spaces. Here this space does not have a classification. Retention policy name, retention updated, etc. So that's some extra data that you can see. There's also the room members that you can see. So for example, I've opened up this space and I can see there are 3 members. I'm able to remove members. I'm also able to add members. I can even add members as a moderator. I would just put the email in here and then choose whether to add them as a moderator or not. If I were to select a space, I also have some options up here. I can export the content of a space. I can delete spaces, block and unblock. So block is like archiving the space. It means all further communication is blocked, but the content is still there. Unblock would mean to allow communication to carry on. I can add tags to spaces, and I can choose whether to set retention by engine or set retention manually. If I want to set retention manually, for example, I just click here, I put in the retention period, let's say 30, and I can choose days, minutes, hours, weeks, months, or years. I've also got the ability to search my spaces. So I have advanced search over here, and I've got many different parameters with which I can search through my spaces. So for example, title, type, whether it's a space or a direct room, the room scope. Maybe I want to search for spaces which have external members in them, so I can see all that communication. I can search rooms based on last activity type, time, and whether they're active or blocked. I can search based on tags. As mentioned before, it's a very good way of using tags so that you can search all rooms with a certain tag. I can search based on classification. Again, this is the Webex classification that you can do natively with Webex. I can search based on retention policy type, maybe every space that has a retention policy, or maybe every space that has a manual retention policy or a automatic retention policy used with the engine. And I've got more parameters here, such as Active Directory groups. Maybe I want to search my spaces based on how many, based on who the Active Directory groups are. Maybe I want to search spaces that have more than a specific amount of users or less than a specific amount of users. So again, many different parameters that I can search my spaces with. So now let's have a look at the retention policy engine. What you can see here is the retention policy engine. I've already got some retention policies in place. If I want to add a retention policy, I click add, I give my policy a name, and then I have the policy condition. So what this means is I can create policies based on tags, based on Active Directory group member. What that means is that if I have a space with members of a specific Active Directory group, it will have the relevant retention policy, or I can do it based on a specific user's email. So let's click here, tags, for example. The next thing I need to configure is the policy condition value. Here I see the tags which that have been created. So any space which has a tag, one of these tags, will have this retention policy, and then I set the retention period. So I can set it, I put a number in here, so let's say 10, and then here I can choose whether that's days, minutes, hours, weeks, months, or years. Over here I see some of the retention policies that have already been created. So for example, I have a policy name here called David. The policy condition is tags. The value is Moshe. So any tag which has any space which has this tag will have a retention period of 45 years, and it's enabled.